Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and for giving up some of your precious time to hear what we have to talk about today. I'm Pete Maguire. I'm a partner in the commercial team here at Wright Hassel. I've actually only been here for around 6 months and today is actually my birthday, so please be gentle with me. I've been asked to facilitate this discussion partly because I'm a little unusual in that I qualified and worked in private practice for a few years, moved in-house for a long period. I did 12 years working for Compass Group, the FTSE Top 40 catering and hospitality business, before returning to private practice. So I have a bit of an insight from both sides of the fence, so to speak. Today's session will be recorded and shared with you in our follow-up. We've had some pre-submitted questions which we'll aim to cover in this morning's conversation. But obviously, if you do have any questions you'd like to ask the panel, please do this via the Q&A chat function. Questions can be anonymised should you feel a bit more comfortable asking that way. We do hope to have some time before the scheduled end of the session to run through any further questions to the extent that those aren't already covered. So we're thrilled to have you join us today as we discuss how in-house counsel are able to demonstrate value within your organisations. At Owen Mitchell, we recognise the unique pressures that are faced by in-house counsel, and our in-house counsel initiative is designed to support and empower you in your roles and goes beyond a support network. It's a community of professionals sharing insights and ideas and solutions. We offer technical updates, soft skills training and leadership development to equip you with the tools and knowledge to, we hope, to excel in your careers. Today's event reflects our commitment to helping our network tackle a much asked question within the legal community. How are we able to demonstrate the value of an in-house legal team and individuals within it? Frankly, I'm really interested in this because I actually left my in-house role due to redundancy. I didn't really feel I was able to argue against the decision, partly because I struggled to demonstrate the value that I was providing. So I'm really interested to hear what people have to say. Before we start introducing our brilliant panel, I'd also like to give a brief introduction to Owen Mitchell for those of you who are meeting us for the first time. We're a full service law firm, which means we can help our clients with both personal and professional matters. We're a national firm with offices across England, Wales, and we've recently expanded into Scotland, and we also have a global network. I truly believe that our lawyers are more than just problem solvers. We're long-term strategic advisors who look for ways to add value that meet your individual needs, and we act as extensions of your teams. We very much work with clients and GCs, not for them. We also go beyond the law and look for opportunities to connect our communities, acting as a conduit. So thank you for joining today and for being part of that. We've got some amazing panelists for you today, and I'm privileged to be joined by Louise Knutson, who's the founder and CEO of Matches Talent, and Gominda Kaur Nija, who's our interim group general counsel at Owen Mitchell. Louise is a global industry leader in executive search and works at the forefront of change every day, and Gominda is in the Lawyers Hot 100 for 2024. So I'm going to pass over to Gominda and Louise to give a brief introduction about themselves and a little more background, if that's okay.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here today, everybody. I'm pleased to be joining you from Dubai. We work globally. I'm actually based in the UK, so founder of Matches Talent. We are, as Peter said, rightly so, a global exec search firm, and that's where we started our roots when I was over in Japan, in Asia. We've kind of really progressed our business because we've seen a need to support businesses with their people optimization performance. And we now support not only from the exec search perspective, but for delivering executive coaching, organizational design and change management consultancy and leadership development retreats. So it's my privilege to be here today to really talk to you about some of the issues that we see on a daily basis and from the business perspective, but also for individuals that are quite driven and trying to progress their career, looking a little bit more about what boards and private shareholders are looking for, as well as adding commercial value to the business, such as topics as Peter, rightly touched upon earlier in the introduction, about redundancies and how you really promote what a GC and legal sector can add value to the business. Pleasure to be here. I'll pass you over to Gominda and save the questions for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Pete, and happy birthday again, Pete. Really pleased to be here. As Pete said, I'm the interim general counsel for Owen Mitchell. I have been here for a few years. My experience spans across fee earning and in-house roles and practice management and operational work. So right now I've got a massive passion around supporting in-house communities demonstrate value so they have longevity in their careers and they're able to provide strategic support, not just legal support. So I've got experience in technical work that goes beyond in-house legal only, so also regulatory compliance, COSEC functions as well, and day-to-day working with your C-suite. So looking forward to some of the questions that you all might have around how do we translate some of the work that we do, because let's face it, we're busy, and you know the priorities are always the same in the same bucket, but how do we utilise some of that information and translate it to really show the right level of profile to the right stakeholders around the value that we're creating and they cannot do without as a responsible business.
That's great, guys. Thank you. And Gominda, just to be clear to everybody who's joining us, you're taking part in this not in your role for IM, but you know, on the basis of your experience working in-house.
Yes. So hopefully I'll be able to share some experience and knowledge around the in-house functionality rather than on behalf of Owen Mitchell.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I suppose let's get down to it. So why are we all here today? Well, we're talking about how to demonstrate the value that GCs and legal teams bring to their businesses. And I guess the first question really to kick off for Louise and Gominda is you know, there is an obvious answer to this, which is job security. But why is it important to be able to demonstrate value? Can I put that to Louise first?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Peter. So I think commercial value is extremely important when we're influencing throughout the organisation, not just for the job security, but in terms of engaging our peers and colleagues. I think one of the things that I see, especially from legal function, is how do we integrate and really become a matrix organisation and empower our people to business partner. Business partnering is an area I think that impacts all functionalities, but specifically legal. It's how do we empower our teams by driving that BP approach so that actually we're making and simplifying the way we work to other parts of the business who may otherwise just tag you as legal. I think, you know, it's the acknowledgement that ultimately it's about ROI and, you know, how do we set things up so that if we go through challenging journeys as a business, that we're not seen as just a cost center. I think they're some of the things that we see a lot of the time. And for people that are wanting to change their careers or move away from to become more commercial, I think you need to start demonstrating that from quite an early stage in your career as a lawyer in a business. Do you want me to talk more about Gominda? What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Louise. I absolutely agree with everything that you've just said. And I mean, Pete, you asked why is it important that we demonstrate value as an in-house? And I think that, well, we've got a responsibility. We're in a role to protect and to proactively support the business to deliver on the other end. So if the strategic objective of that business is to deliver a product or a service, and X on the bottom line, how do we as an in-house function make that happen? So we've obviously going to have our own goals about how we get there and help make the objectives be delivered. But part of that is to almost deconstruct the value add, because there is an element of that as an in-house function, there will always be it's a given. There's an element of every day your BAU that you're delivering is normal. But within that, where's the value add? So I would say it's really important to demonstrate the why you need us bit is about, look, I can make sure that I've got a handle on the landscape. I know as an in-house function that if something's coming along the horizon that is relevant for our business, that I will be all over it and I will make sure that I will exploit an opportunity or I'll protect our business accordingly by providing you the right advice upfront proactively. And that value there You wouldn't necessarily get that by instructing externals. You need to know your business through business partnering in order to demonstrate the value. That's bespoke work. That's really commercial, and that's an example of how you could demonstrate value and not necessarily just a cost center. So that's one of the examples that I can come up with in the moment. But I'm hoping that it will hopefully incite some of the emotion around that kind of piece, and we'll have some more questions around that, and then we can get into the detail of it.
I think that's great. I think in my experience, I think the key really as an in-house lawyer is to become a trusted advisor and an enabler. It's not appearing to be a blocker. Now, obviously, and there are potentially issues around integrity and ethics, which then we'll probably touch on later. But as an in-house lawyer, being able to find a route through something, in my experience, it is probably the most fundamental thing, isn't it? It's enabling the business to move things forward. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, enabling is key.
I would also add that through that, it's the communication, isn't it? It's about simplifying the language. I think one of the things that I see when we deal with boards and CEOs is, as lawyers, you have the natural articulation of presenting. And I think understanding how, when there are stresses in the business in other areas, how that we really simplify that language and work again. I say empowering the teams because I see that we get young teams that are very driven and focused on delivering what they're doing. And it's really important to build those connections with people in other functions across the business from a very early stage in your career, so that it continues, so that they're seeing the value and that they've got you as support, because that enable piece cross-function is really key. So and that's communication.
And I guess that, that leads on, Louise, really, doesn't it, to we've talked about how important it is to be able to demonstrate value, but I guess that what goes hand in hand with that is identifying who you need to demonstrate that value to. Because I think from certainly from my experience, there are a lot of different stakeholders and influences within an organization. All of those value different things, different approaches, and that then really feeds into your point about communication. I think that the best example I can give of that was putting a paper together for an FD about an increase in insurance costs. I am going back a long time to when I did this, and I started. The paper had to be presented to the FD and then ultimately to the chief exec. I started off with I think a 5-page summary, including some very nice charts and what have you. So it wasn't all blurb. Put it to the FD, who cut it down before we went in to see the chief exec to 2 sides of A4. Sat down in front of the chief exec. He took one look at it and said, "Well, I'm not going to read that. What's it going to cost me?" So it's different communication styles, different I guess triggers for each of those individual stakeholders that you're dealing with that are so important, really, and almost moving away from legalese wherever possible.
It's integrating it, isn't it? It's having the ability to get to know and see things through other people's lenses. I think that's really important, and that makes the whole influence piece easier. And I think ultimately we live in a society that's quite reactive, so it's about making those proactive changes to it and thinking, okay, well, I've got nothing necessary to gain immediately, but actually investing in those relationships for the long term. We have 3 key words in our business. It's people, connection, and culture, and I'm a firm believer that they are the things that you can really have as a key cornerstone almost to driving that in your career. And especially with certain sectors and functionalities, we see it a lot in the tech as well as legal and the tech side of things. How do you go from being an expert in one area to really, broadening your horizons? And I think that's when you have the ability to influence, and ultimately as well, you get the return on what you want as an individual.
That's really helpful, thank you. And Gominda, I think, when we've discussed this before, you've talked about it not being just being about influencing upwards. I think it's a broader piece, isn't it? Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think that you've got key stakeholders that are looking to deliver various objectives, and you can have a role to play in that. Your feedback loop is 360, so it will come round, and you will eventually have that opportunity to profile things going upward to board in the right spaces if that's where you report. But ultimately, it is about the shadow that you're leaving behind when you're walking through, and the marks that you're leaving with your style of communication. But if there's one sort of two concepts of advice that I would give to all of us as in-houses, and this is something that I've practiced and delivered against, is really self-challenging around your legal operations function within your in-house team. So that front door, what it's like, how advice is provided. So that brilliant example that you've just given Pete around the paper, I'm quite like that. Some of my team will say, oh, she chops and changes our emails all the time. It's because I know that the stakeholder just wants the answer first, if it's a yes or it's a no, so that they can get their tissues out if it's a no, and if it's a yes, they can start to have a little mini party, but then they can have the detail behind it, especially if it's subject to. But they really need to know in the moment. It's just going slightly beyond, because these people, they're very busy. They double click the email. If it's a no, they might just mark it for later. And if it's a yes, they'll have a quick read and go, right, fine. It is enabling them further than just the legal answer. And it's just having that awareness that these roles go beyond just the answer you've given. It actually has a domino effect. So having that awareness and knowing about the business and how it operates is going to be really helpful. The second concept I think is worth sharing is the piece around communication. How to really grip someone's attention is the what's in it for them in their language. So if I'm in a hurry again and I'm on my phone, bearing in mind we've got a really a really fast-paced culture at the moment with real time. If you're on your phone, no one's going to keep scrolling 10 scrolls. So we've really got to think, if this person's busy and on the go, your chance is that first line, and you need to think about what's in it for them. So if it is the FD, talk money first, potentially. And if it's not, if it's another compliance person, talk compliance first. So really think hard. And, you can't do that in a silo. You've got to do it with the whole of the team. So it might be a review of your own operations and approach with the business that you work within.
I think that's really important. I think my experience certainly. So if another example that I always have is when I moved in house, I actually replaced my client contact, and there were files that I had worked on whilst I was in private practice that were still waiting for me when I started the new role. And after a little while, I actually looked back at some of the advice I'd given and realised actually it was more, if you pardon the vernacular, it was more about backside covering than actually answering a question and answering it in a commercial way that people could understand. I think that's where we come back to actually understanding our audience, and therefore who you've got to demonstrate that value to, and how they like to receive it. I think that's not something that, as in my experience, private practice lawyers are necessarily that good at. I think that's where in-house actually is able to, somebody working in-house can shape things, I think, far better in my experience than people in practice, because they are working with those people at the coalface day in, day out. And I think that's there's a distinct difference there. So the challenge really, I guess, is to focus on that commerciality, isn't it? And to shape your advice and speak plainly. Does that sort of resonate, Louise, with what you come across?
Yeah, I think the how is important there, isn't it? Because a really basic, obvious one is the listening of what they're needing and tuning into that. Because I think more often than not, we get people focused on what their delivery is going to be rather than what the output is and what's needed. And I've been in many situations where, a board is extremely busy. They're ready to do the next thing. They want to know the headlines, and getting used to that style of delivery as well, so that you leave feeling that you've added value and you've been listened to, because otherwise you run the risk of just presenting something at people and they're busy thinking of the next thing. So really fine tuning that, and that comes down to the listening skill a lot of the time.
And in your experience, Louise, as lawyers, do you think we listen enough?
I think I would hope so.
That's a bit of a loaded question. I'm sorry, but
but you know, again, I've been in certain situations. A live example that I was involved in, and again, it was a few years back. We were brought in as project consultants to help support data licensing litigation. And actually, the scenario that we've discovered there, it was just fine tuning what the internal teams needed with legal. You know, understanding how that we could avoid through creating customer scenarios to simplify the language. And that took a good few hours in a room, understanding the language, breaking down the barriers, simplifying it, and then talking to the teams on the other side and understanding where their pain points were. So if you're seeing it from both sides and listening, that stakeholder piece, and we do this a lot in search, it's really understanding 360 and getting under the skin of organizations and people versus what's presented to you. So I guess there's a lot in of accepting things at surface value and really understanding, getting that trust, building the relationships so they tell you what the pain points are. You're more likely to be able to solve the challenges if you know what the pain points are. And if they feel that they haven't got the relationship, they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, I think that certainly resonates. So, Gominda, just in terms of that relationship point, is there anything you can add to that in terms of how that's worked for you?
Relationship management is probably more important than the written legal advice in many ways, because there's already a precursor to the level of trust that your stakeholder places in your advice. It's almost like you make an appointment with the doctor, and how do you feel when you get a locum? Straight away, oh, I wish it was my proper GP. And it's creating that trust. How is that that locum's got no chance when your patient doesn't want to know it from day dot. But with us in-house, we've got opportunity to create the partnerships with these stakeholders. And it is sometimes just simply as keeping an eye on developments on your internal news and going, oh, there's something new there. I'll reach out to them and say, brilliant, well done. This is about being a full shaped partner for that business, understanding what we're doing strategically, demonstrating you're not in a lane only, that you really do care about success of the business overall, and you're part of that journey. So when I see something come out, I am quick to say to somebody, fantastic. We did a bit around Black History Month this month, and I thought some of the VTs were just really, they resonated to me, and I felt they were fantastic. I've had nothing to do with these people that were on there, but I wanted to reach out to them, and perhaps in the future I will have something to do with them, and they will remember that I reached out to them, and they will therefore, precursor is that actually I'm a decent person, I care enough, and hopefully they'll accept my advice as it comes to them. So I think there's an entire wraparound service, not just the legal advice, and I think that's where we're heading as an in-house function as well. Generally, is in-house lawyers. It's the largest growing practice area, as data points show us from the Law Society.
Yeah, and it also makes it, and the fact that that's the largest growing piece makes it harder for me to recruit people. But let's move on swiftly from that as private practice commercial lawyer. So we've touched on why it's important to be able to demonstrate value. We've touched on who you need to demonstrate that to, and how you understand what they value. So that's about what they value. I guess the next question for me really is about how in-house lawyers can derive ROI, so return on investment for a legal function, and how you almost make the case that you need to be involved in key strategic discussions and how you can add value to them. I don't know, Gamin, is that something you can give us some feedback on?
Yeah, the short answer is it's not easy. However, you can strategize over a period of time to provide a successful profile of the rate on return in this space. So the kind of things to think about are data. Again, there needs to be an investment in data, and we're not really invested in terms of technology and things like that. But you can do it. It is possible. You can use existing tools you've got in the business from an IT perspective. You can go as basic as Excel, as long as you've got some data points at the end of it. And I'm talking about volume and matter type. So there's a difference between the number of low-level work that comes in, like NDAs, for example, and more complex work and how long that takes. And I think that it's about then making sure the connection's made to strategic delivery. And then where else would that support have come from? External at X cost, and actually if you convert the hourly rate you might have got externally versus what you've got internally on a salaried level, there's already a value there to be had. So I think that the data points, once you've wrapped them all up and profiled them and put them forward, it's pretty easy to demonstrate, but it's putting the time and effort into the data points and bringing that forward. There is a role for your external legal support to play. I think that's a really important point. Always use them when it's needed. You mustn't advise outside competency, but they won't know your strategy as a business. So that's what your in-house legals do. They will sit there and they will be helping to make the right decisions and supporting the C-suite to make the right decisions on behalf of your business, which your externals won't be able to. So there is a way of working in that triangle with C-suite, externals and internals. But getting the data points together, I think, is key in helping to demonstrate that piece.
Presumably extends into things like horizon scanning. So if you're involved with business strategy as a GC and therefore in the direction the business is moving in, I guess it gives you a head start on anything that particularly legal developments that may be coming over the hill. It's how you shape that, isn't it, really, to fit with your strategy going forward.
Yeah, and any changes in the horizon, whether they're legal or non-legal, that you feel might impact strategy and delivery, should be called out in some sort of quarterly reporting or monthly reporting. And maybe someone else to lead in the business, for example, but at least you're there showing your value. There are some things that are simply not quantifiable, but it's about articulating it to the point where there is obvious value in them. And I would say things like where other businesses may have got it wrong, the investment wasn't there in the protection and having an in-house function, and they've had a sanction or a fine because something got missed. So that, I mean, and they're bad news stories, aren't they? But they're also quite they're quite good in enabling an in-house function to be invested in and being present. And actually, it's easy to say, oh, that firm got a sanction for this, and we don't, because we've done the right thing and we've got a function that will protect you against all these things.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Louise, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would fully agree. I think the data piece is huge. I think it's about prioritising what's presented and what can be worked through and unpicked, because that's where there can be lots of investment. Well, we can mitigate the risk, and then that can in return can have massive impacts on the business in a positive way. And that almost is highlighting the ability and the value again of the legal department and what they can do, but being really poignant on what you're picking and choosing in the priority list, because again, resource, you can't have it on everything, but I think there are plenty of quick wins that are missed, and I think it's about understanding where there are those quick wins that haven't necessarily been looked at previously, and how you can bring those to the surface almost.
Okay. And so I guess the takeaway from that really is it's about getting on being active, horizon scanning, getting on the front foot, and using your knowledge of the business's strategy to make informed decisions. So, as an example, do you really want to make does your commercial guy really want to make a 5-year commitment to something? If that doesn't fit with the strategy that you have been made aware of, and I think if you can't, the underlying point, I guess, is that if you're not part of those key strategic discussions, it's not possible really for a GC function to plan ahead, is it? I think that's probably the underlying thing.
I think on that note, though, I think it's more about being strategically aware. You might not know the details of it, but understanding where the position of the business is, understanding in terms of its journey, whether it's going through change and that's impacting the bottom line, making yourself commercially aware. And there are plenty of things that you can do to kind of get that understanding, even if you're not involved in that firsthand. And then almost having that as a measure of, okay, well, what could we do to demonstrate our ability? What should I be looking out for? And again, being proactive rather than reactive to situations. when we're looking at GCs moving or wanting to expand their careers to broader functions, one of the first things we ask them is, what have you done commercially in the business that has saved money for the business, that's put you at the forefront? What are you doing outside of your role to demonstrate that commercial acumen? So having that personal agenda as well as the day-to-day delivery, I think, is key, because I think far too often we see lawyers come through time short, focus on what they're delivering now, versus having that own journey of, actually, I'm going to step back and see the bigger picture. And if I look at the bigger picture, what can I add value to? And that's not just legal, that's everybody, I'd like to add. But, it's continuously working on that own personal development journey, as well as what the expectation is on you to deliver in your role. And I think having that clear view of both sides, you're far more likely to gain traction with senior stakeholders and understand where they're coming from in terms of the perspective. And that's how you'll win the relationships and influence.
That's really helpful. Thank you. We're moving on with a couple more points. I am conscious about any Q&A. There will be time, obviously, at the end of our discussion for any questions that anybody's got. But if you'd like to put anything into the chat, please do so. It's very much Chatham House rules. I would stress that. So probably one of the thorniest issues at the moment, and that's particularly given some of the more public issues that we've had. I'm thinking here particularly about things like the Post Office and Horizon, is when values and professional integrity and ethics actually collide. I'd be interested, particularly to hear from you, Gurminder, on this, about how you consider that GC, what you consider a GC's position to be in those sort of circumstances. Do you want to talk that through a little bit?
Sure. So I think that just putting the Post Office position to a side, as in the detail of what happened, the overall theme of it is integrity and ethics and how you operate. And I think that applies to any profession. With the legal one, our regulations apply from the SRA even when you're in-house, as you all know. And in any regulated profession, you should not be or feel under any pressure from a business to do something that would be in breach of that. That is the first thing I put out there. If you feel you're in that kind of position, that is something to raise immediately. You will have your own internal policies. There's obviously, you have to look inward and look at, is this something I should be doing? For me, as a leader in the space, it's on me to make sure my team don't feel that way, or if they do, they raise it with me. And then for me, it's about assessing it, doing the right thing, whatever that is. Even if it's a nuclear option, the option's there, because if you have to do something that would have prevented a Post Office scandal, and that's on you as an individual, and you have that duty, you've got the accountability to follow it through. And actually, people will be talking about you for the right reasons years later, not for the wrong ones. Because as an in-houser, that's your job, and that's what you're regulated for, and that's what the public have put you in. They've put us in those positions of trust, and that's what we're there for. And I genuinely believe we've got to take it right back to when we got appointed as lawyers, and those rules that we signed up to, and the promises that we made, and certificates that we've got, and they mean something, and they mean something to each and every one of us. And if we want to comply with those and commit to those and continue with that, then this is what we have to do. We mustn't advise outside our competency. We mustn't feel that we're doing anything untoward that's outside of ethical duties, and we'll be fine. However, there will be times where you're challenged in terms of risk appetite and how are you going to deliver in accordance with our commercial needs. That's okay to consider, and consider again. Talk about it within your team, find a different person, talk to your network, not about the actual issue at hand, but perhaps, can I talk about this confidentially? What do you guys think about this? you need to rely on your network to give you a sense check before you make any moves that would be, the other way. As in, this is a big deal. That what I'm saying is that be very aware of your obligations so you don't end up in a post office situation. But also note that it's quite rare, as in this, generally responsible businesses want to support everybody in them, and they're not in it to cause issues or to make to have incorrect decision making or unethical decision making. As long as there is good governance there, meetings are minuted, there's email trails, etc. As our role as the leaders of the GC function is to uphold that. And also self-challenge, because we can't automatically go to, oh, well, it's unethical, oh, I can't do that, or, completely go into the space of being scared and worried. And that's experience and use your network and talk to the stakeholders that might be challenging you a little and say, look, I'm in a position where I think that this might not be quite right for these reasons. And then they'll have an open conversation, hopefully, with you. So I think whilst the post office has presented us with some questions about our own industry, I think as long as you're operating in a way that you feel is ethical and you are self-challenging as you go, you should be absolutely fine. I haven't in my whole career come across anything that has been so problematic that would put me in that space to be concerned in post office space. The post office is a very unique situation that escalated. But people might feel differently depending on the governance they've got in place in their business and the people that they've got in place. The pressures are very different. In-house functions tend to be small, not a lot of people around, and that's why I say lean on your network.
I think, yeah, probably the underlying point is that as an in-house lawyer, as a GC, you're not actually making decisions on behalf of the business, are you? You're advising the business. And I think that's one of the key things really to remember, because although things can get a bit blurred around remit and things can be a bit stretched, you're there as in an advisory capacity. You're not there actually making the decision as such. That would be my view of it. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think to an extent that is correct. I think there are some spaces where you advise and then the business make their decision based on the advice. So that, I guess the liability around that rests with the lawyers that have provided that advice, the same way that a fee earning an external relationship would work. So there is that to consider. But I think in the space of commercials, it would have been a business decision, but that's the point at which the in-house function and the lawyer has to consider whether is that in keeping with my ethical duties, what's happened there. That's a personal decision. I think with the post office, it was different because the delegation that they had in practice to take criminal prosecutions forward. So that's why it was different. Their decision making, they were empowered in a different way. So that's why I'm saying it's quite unique, and the comparator isn't quite like for like when you're in an in-house professional services function.
Thank you.
I was just going to add to that, because I think the other thing that comes back to communication is not all organisations are clear on what their values and ethics are. So I think as individuals, it's about thinking in the situations of what is the ethical to do and having the ability to empower yourself to speak up when the time is right. A thing that we often advise as well to law firms is the coaching element. So coaches are naturally facilitators, and I think there are often challenging situations that individuals are in where they're questioning what's happening as an organisation from an ethical standpoint, and also they're feeling quite torn by that. So again, I think there's a lot on the personal development side of knowing what one should be doing and really pushing forward that, and not being afraid, because it's that fear factor as well that we see many individuals. They're stressed in their roles, they've got busy workloads, actually unpicking it all and simplifying it. I think the simplification of things and getting key on your communication at all levels can solve a lot of problems that we face in organisations. And I think it applies to this.
Thank you, Louise. That's really helpful. Problems with the camera again. I think it's back on again. We're all right. So I guess a final question to you both before we move on to any questions that the guys dialing in have got. What would, if you were to give some top tips to our audience today as to how they would get it right, what would you suggest would be sort of key top tips and takeaways for them? Can I start with Gaminder on that one?
Quite broad headlines I'm going to give you, but
okay.
Firstly, operations, how you operate, your operating model in your function, right from intake to delivery. Think about marginal gains, think about repeat work and data. So those are the kind of things in the operations space, really to consider those. There's plenty of information out there to help. You can get external consultants in if you needed it, but really self-challenge on a day-to-day. How efficient and effective are you running your business, as in your function for the business? Then the second one is stakeholder management, essentially business partnering. So try to double hat. I know it's hard. I know it's not easy because you're SMEing, you're doing your expertise every day, but try to see if you could, again, back to operations, see if the model of your team could work so it's a partnering as well as an expert function, so that you can get to know your stakeholders and really deliver. So almost do that triage assessment that you would, back to the patient doctor. You come in, they chat to you, they understand everything before they give you the solution. If we can operate that way, as a business partnering function as well as an expert advisor, the business will benefit. So it's two for me, operations and BPing.
Thank you. And Louise?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I think it's commercial value to the stakeholder. I think it's business partnering, creating allyship across the organisation is key. And then I would also add it's leaning on your external network and bringing that to the organisation, because I think a lot of the time we're so focused in-house, and it's about, who can you lean on, who's doing things differently in the wider market, really developing your own knowledge so that you can bring something fresh to the organisation. They're the key things that stand out to me when we're dealing with people above and beyond the situation. So I fully agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you both. In my experience, so firstly, getting to know the business and getting under the skin of it is absolutely critical, because without that, your advice can't be relevant, and can't be couched in a way that addresses the things that are important to them. Again, I'm possibly I'm a little bit unusual, but anytime I get a new instruction from a client now that I'm back in private practice, I will always ask, can I come and see you? Can I put a high vis on and wander around the factory? Can I come and actually have a chat with the people who work with you, so that I can understand what's important? So I think that for me is the fundamental principle, really, is get under the skin of things. And similarly, just to come back to the points you both made, a lot of the time when you are in-house, you are a bit of a generalist. You have your areas of specialism, but we've all been there, I suspect, where somebody has come up to you and put a piece of paper in front of you and asked you to advise on it, and you look at it and think, well, it's not something I have any experience on, and their response to that is usually, well, you're the lawyer. What do you mean you don't know? So that's where your network is so important, and I would just encourage anybody who's listening today, please just pick up the phone if you just want to bounce something off somebody. It's not the sort of thing that the clock's going to start running for if somebody wants to just have a quick chat and just use this as a sounding board. So I think that would be the key thing for me, is lean on that network, as Gaminder's mentioned. So I think that's about it. There's not been any additional questions submitted, but I really want to thank Louise and Gaminder for their time today. It's really been interesting. If anybody has got any questions they want to submit now, please do so. But if not, just to highlight that we've got our next in-house council event on the 7th of November. That's taking place in our London office. And that is focusing on prioritising mental health for you and your team. So our panel for that are Katie Byrne, who's the head of our commercial disputes team at Owen Mitchell. She's going to be joined by Jenny Arrowsmith, who's a partner in our employment team, and Kate Ferguson, who is head of our responsible business team. But alongside them will be Richard Martin, who is the CEO of the Mindful Business Charter, and Brian Pringle, who's VP for Legal Regulatory at Visa Europe. So there'll be more information and registration details on our website, but I suspect that will all be circulated fairly soon. We will follow up from today with an email that will include a feedback form and also a recording of today's session for those of you who want to hear my voice for a bit longer. For the short questionnaire, please, we'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out and leave your honest feedback so that we can keep curating these events and making sure we stay relevant to what you want to hear about. So thank you very much for your time, everybody, and hopefully see you all again soon. Thank you.